Okay, sorry, it cut me off. But if you want to watch these videos of Emmett Till, you're more than welcome to do so. I can post the links if you're interested. But this just talks about the murder of Emmett Till, which we've already discussed. So we're going to get Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. And that's going to happen from 1955 to 1956. And this was a planned attack. This was a planned boycott. And Parks was member of the NAACP. I'm sorry, I didn't even tell you what the NAACP stands for. If I didn't know if you guys knew or anything like that, but it's a National Association for Advancement of Colored People. And it was formed and established to kind of try to help fight civil rights. It was formed in 1909, I do believe, off the top of my head. But this Montgomery bus boycott was a chosen actual thing. They chose Rosa Parks to be the center of this Montgomery bus boycott. So it was very, very planned. I'm going to show you this clip real quick that's going to give you some information about it. Then I will explain what happened at the Montgomery bus boycott.
In Montgomery, Alabama, people looked at how they were being impacted negatively by their society, and they assumed responsibility for change.
Joanne Robinson was an English professor at Alabama State University, and she headed up an organization called the Women's Political Council. Joanne Robinson had an episode on the Montgomery bus where she is accosted by a bus driver. She leaves the bus, in terror. She thought the bus driver was going to hit her as he demanded she sit in the black-only section in an almost empty bus. When she talked to other women in the Women's Political Council about this episode, she found out that they had similar experiences. There were a number of arrests in 1955 of black women who were violating the segregation ordinance on the buses. And on the night of December 1st, when Rosa Parks was arrested, Joanne Robinson springs into action, and they actually execute this plan to initiate a bus boycott.
At the time, most people rode the bus to kind of get around. There weren't as many cars on the road. So you begin to realize that if we don't ride the buses, we're able to kind of break the system to a great degree.
Joanne Robinson comes on campus late that night with a couple of students, runs off 50,000 flyers. The next morning, between classes, they pass out these flyers. She calls the civil rights attorney, Fred Gray. She calls E.B. Nixon, labor organizer, really the recognized leader of Black Montgomery. And they decide to endorse the boycott. They organize the Montgomery Improvement Association to execute and to coordinate the activities surrounding the Montgomery bus boycott. And they select this newcomer, Martin Luther King, to head up the Montgomery Improvement Association. Martin Luther King breathes into Montgomery ideas about love and civil disobedience, overcoming adversity.
And the people of Montgomery were willing not only to listen, but to act on this.
I was the NAACP Youth Council president, and I participated in the boycott. I walked to school, and we just saw the empty buses go by because there were no black people on them.
At the time that this movement began here, we had about 50,000 African Americans living in Montgomery. And there were pretty close to 50,000 black people who worked together during this bus boycott.
We stayed off the buses and found other ways to get to where we needed to go.
And so they bought station wagons. And they had an actual route, just like buses have routes.
For several weeks, I was a volunteer driver every day, going out and just hauling people to work or to school.
So people just didn't walk. They rode, but they rode in a system that they created. 382 days. That's a long time. Can you imagine how empowered people felt? It's like, we did what?
The Montgomery bus boycott says to the nation that segregation is no longer the law of the land, and that the formula for attacking segregation in all of its facets is going to be nonviolent civil disobedience on one hand and litigation on the other.
The boycott was one of the greatest examples of civic engagement of the 20th century.
Awesome. It is. That video kind of gave me goosebumps. It is a huge movement. So about 9 months before Rosa Parks was actually arrested for not getting out of her seat, a 15-year-old girl was arrested. Her name was Claudette Colvin, and she was arrested in Montgomery for the same act of not getting up out of her seat. Claudette actually was pregnant. She was 15 years old. They were going to make her the face of the civil rights movement, but since she was 15 and pregnant, they deemed that as not a sufficient person to be in charge of the civil rights movement. So then obviously Rosa Parks stepped in. They have been planning this movement for over a year before in December of 1955. And it's just such a huge movement. And what it's going to do is the goals, of the boycott was people to see how powerful African Americans were and how, getting these, this need for, to get rid of institutionalized slavery or institutionalized racism, meaning that institutions like buses, like public buses, should not, basically segregate people based on their color. And a lot of the Montgomery buses lost several thousands of dollars in business because 40,000 African Americans didn't ride the bus that whole year. So it was just so cool. And then they had taxi cabs that obviously would pick them up and run them to different places. It was a huge commitment. And then finally in November of 1956, the Supreme Court did declare that Alabama's bus segregation was unconstitutional. And it really does help Martin Luther King Jr., form the Southern Leadership Conference or Coalition, which is, the SCLC, that's going to push for a lot of really, really great things. It was a 13-month protest. You get Montgomery Improvement Association, which coordinated the bus boycott, and obviously its president was Martin Luther King Jr., which is why he is the face of the civil rights movement, along with Rosa Parks. And it reflected a lot of power and a lot of growing, so on and so forth. So I'm going to skip over this next slide and this one, but I'm going to kind of bounce to this slide. So the civil rights movement was huge, and it was going to promote a lot of different things. One of my favorite songs that comes, from way later on when the movie Freedom Riders comes out, it was based on Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, I Have a Dream. So I'm going to play that. And that's all I'm going to play for you. So if you want to listen to that song, you're more than welcome to do so. But thank you so much for listening.